Welcome to 5460, the Joe West podcast. Featuring former Major League Baseball umpire Joe West. For 6 decades, no one has seen more baseball than Joe West. And now he shares those stories with you every week right here on the Podcast Heat Network.
Joe West is asking the Reds to leave the field. I guess maybe as a form of security.
Well, Joe West is not going back behind the catcher. So what is he doing? He wants to throw him out or what?
He's not going to back away from confrontation. It's just not in his makeup.
Which guy are we talking about backing away?
Well, come to think of it, it's both guys.
And they're warning the Atlanta dugout now. A helmet came flying out. Bobby Cox, I don't think threw the helmet. One of his players did, but Bobby's jawing back at Joe West. But somebody's been tossed, and here comes Cox. It was Bobby Cox who threw the helmet out there.
Off the umpire, and that's a foul ball. Joe West gets drilled, and he appears none the worse for it. He's a strong man.
Nice. Now Joe's going to give him some argument because Mark's saying, "Why do you do?" Joe, just get over there and umpire, will you? Yeah. Just get over there and umpire. No. That's all.
It's 5460, the Joe West podcast. Here's Joe West and your host, Mike Claiborne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5460, the Joe West podcast. I'm Mike Claiborne, and along with Joe, we have a special guest. I don't know where to start with her resume. She's in virtually every basketball Hall of Fame. She's been one of the greatest athletes this country's ever seen, and she is still involved in a lot of great things when it comes to women in sports and just the whole game of sports. It's an honor to welcome Hall of Famer Ann Meyers. Ann, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Joe, I look forward to it.
Well, let's start with how you two had a chance to meet.
Well, Joe has to tell that story.
Yeah, we met through her husband, Don, and we have some mutual friends.
Well, hold on, Joe. Let's let everybody know the great Hall of Famer Don Drysdale.
Yeah. Don married Ann years ago, and we met through him. And Don was announcing all over the country, and I think he was announcing at one time for the White Sox, wasn't he? Right. And in fact, he worked with Hawk Harrelson. And Hawk actually told me one day, he says, Don was the most professional announcer I ever worked with. And so it's really funny because I was working in Philadelphia one time, and I'd taken this little boy to the game who was from North Carolina. His dad was there. He says, "You think you can get him some autographs?" And I said, "Well, you want an autograph from a real ball player. Let me see if I can get Don to come down here and sign a picture for him." And so he signed a nice baseball and got a picture with him. And not too long after that, he passed, and that was such a sad day. And I remember when we went to LA right after that happened, and you came over and gave me a big hug on the field. I remember that so vividly, like it was yesterday. And
I know Don had a lot of respect for you, and you know he really enjoyed the way you call the game, and which wasn't always easy for Donnie with umpires. But yeah, I don't remember, Mike, the exact time we met or whatever, but I know that Donnie and Joe were close, and just along the way we've kind of stayed in touch. And when he was umpiring, which he just retired, but whether he was coming to Arizona or LA, and I happened to be at a game, I'd try and go down and see him, and he got to meet my daughter, Drew, which, they've got a great connection. And I don't know if you've met Darren and DJ yet, but.
No. In fact, Drew came up to me at the All-Star game, Mike, you'll get a kick out of this. And I'm sitting there with Rita, my wife, and this cute lady comes up to me and she says, "You might not remember me." And I'm going, uh-oh. And she said, "My mother said if I saw you that I'd better say hello to you." And it was your daughter, Drew. She was such a sweetheart. She was at UCLA.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, she's graduated and has come out with an album and sings like her father, thank goodness.
Well, anyway, that was where I met Drew. And of course, we stayed in touch for all these years. It's been wonderful. I'm sorry you missed our game in Chicago last year.
Yes.
Of course, you were working or had something to do.
Yeah, I was working a broadcast for the Phoenix Mercury, and I know Mark Eaton was there, and I was looking forward to seeing him, a UCLA alumni, and then shortly he passed away after that.
Yeah.
Well, Ann, you mentioned UCLA, and for those who don't know Ann Meyers, you and your brother Dave were there as well, and you were one of the great All-Americans. What was it like to be part of a program where everybody knew about the men because of Coach Wooden and the great championships they had, but the women's team was pretty darn good too, and you spurred that into a great dynasty as well. So what was it like being part of that whole program?
You have to go back even further than that, Mike, because in 1972, Title IX was passed, and I was still in high school. David was a freshman, I think, at UCLA at the time, so we were always going up to the UCLA games watching him play. But my senior year at UCLA, I had, in high school, my senior year in high school, I had made the USA women's national basketball team. I was the only high school player to do that. And there were no scholarships at that time. My sister Patty, who was the oldest of 11, had gone to Cal State Fullerton and played basketball, volleyball, softball there and won a championship in basketball. And so I saw women playing sports. It's not like, I listen to even players today, athletes today say, well, we didn't have a role model. There were plenty of women role models back then. Babe Diedrichson, Patty Berg, Althea Gibson, Wilma Rudolph, Wyoming Atiyah. So you can go down the list. There were great women athletes that were competing. And I was just fortunate enough to see that. But in 1975, UCLA offered the very first athletic scholarship to me because my brother David was there. And his junior year, he was rooming with a guy named Kenny Washington, who was on Papa's first championship teams in 64 and 65. And he was going to be the women's coach. And so they came home one weekend and said, hey, how'd you like to go to UCLA and play basketball? And that's how I was recruited. Not like it is today. So being close to home and having an education at such a wonderful university really helped change who I am today because it is truly a school in their athletic department of champions. And being there when Coach Wooden was there and Terry Donahue was there and Jim Bush was there and J.D. Morgan was the athletic director. Gary Cunningham was the assistant, kind of took me under his wing. Judy Holland would become the athletic director for the women. We had a green trailer behind the women's gym was the office for the women's athletic department. Wow. So certainly things have changed since then, 50 years later. But as much as it's changed, it's remained the same.
Well, you left out one of the great role models for women, and that's you. Because you have been one of the greatest role models of all time for women, and I know you were good friends with my friend Kay Yao and Nora Lynn Finch, and so you've really you stand out more than any woman athlete that I know on the face of the planet. So
well, I appreciate that so much, Joe. And so much, I was just in the right place at the right time too, not only with the scholarship, and then the Women's Sports Foundation started after Billie Jean King had beaten Bobby Riggs, and that gave a lot of women athletes an opportunity to gather together that really had never really known each other. And so that's been a great support system for women athletes even today. And they've done a lot of research and studies with women athletes, and certainly being in the game of basketball, and I played 7 sports in high school and 3 at UCLA. But, just seeing what the WNBA where it's come from, when the WBL was the very first league in this country back in 78, 79. And I was the #1 draft for that. And but certainly I think that where women's basketball has opened up the door for so many women athletes, not just in that sport, but and soccer has done the same thing too. But, talking about equal pay and so many political issues and social issues that go on in this world.
You forgot to talk about your NBA experience as well. You were the first woman to be invited to an NBA training camp with the Indiana Pacers. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I always felt like it was more than just a token invitation because you were a good player. And I'm sure those guys turned it up a notch to make sure you didn't school them because they didn't want that on their resume.
Well, my whole life I'd been playing against guys. I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters and was between David and Jeff and was always at the playgrounds. And even when I got to UCLA, playing at Pauley Pavilion and pickup games and so forth. And David had gone on. He was the #1 draft pick with the LA Lakers and then was in the trade that brought Kareem to LA. And David went and played for the Milwaukee Bucks. So I was hoping to go to the 1980 Olympics. I'd been on the 76 team, which was the very first year they had women's basketball in the Olympics, and we won silver. So I was hoping to go to 1980, and because you had to be amateur at that time. And so as I said, I was #1 draft pick in the WBL, and I thought, let me stay amateur for another year, and then I'll go into the league. And all of a sudden, I get a call from the new owner of the Indiana Pacers, says, hey, how would you like to try out for the Pacers? And I'm like going, what? But it was an opportunity of a lifetime. It really was. And I look back now and, they offered me a $50,000 contract, which even that was, I think the average salary, the minimum salary in the NBA at that time back in 1979 was $140,000. So equal pay still was not being offered for women. And, but I just thought, okay, the 1980 Olympics, and it was a difficult decision because Jimmy Carter had not made the decision yet to boycott. But I thought because it was an opportunity, I took it. And certainly I had forego the 1980 Olympics, but then we boycotted and being invited to the free agent rookie camp as a free agent. And Jack McCloskey was the assistant. Slick Leonard was the head coach, and he came out to California several times to try and talk me out of it. But I had gone through this in high school. I had played summer league basketball with the boys team my junior and senior year, between my junior and senior year of high school. And I had planned on playing on the boys team during my senior year. And it was interesting, all the things that were being said about me back then, 5 years earlier when I was in high school, the negative things and so forth. So I did deal with some of those things, but when you got to the professional level, thank goodness the internet did not exist. I go, whoa. But, for me, it was wonderful. We had 2 practices for 3 days. And I was hoping to go on and further, but I did not. But I signed a personal service contract. And with that contract, it offered me the opportunity to broadcast for the Indiana Pacers. And I did community service work and went out and spoke and so forth. But, I wanted to play. I was 24 years old. I still wanted to play. So they released me from my contract, and I went to play into the WBL. And my rights from the Houston Angels had been traded to the New Jersey Gems. And so the second year of the league I played, I was MVP. And but I sat out the next year because they didn't pay me all my money. But in that interim, I was offered something to go compete in the Women's Superstars. And that is where I met Bob Uecker and Don Drysdale, who I had no idea who Don was.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You didn't know Don Drysdale, a California girl. Dodgers are big. Don Drysdale, Sandy Koufax really put that team on the map as far as California was concerned. And you didn't know Don Drysdale.
Growing up in Southern California, and certainly we lived in, my mom and dad were from Milwaukee, and they moved out to California, lived in San Diego. The first 6 of us were born in San Diego. He worked for Sears, my dad. We moved back to Chicago, and we were in Chicago for about 8-9 years, and moved back out to Southern California about 63 or 64. So as big as the Dodgers were, and all the sports really, I mean, the Lakers had just moved out there too after the Dodgers, and you certainly had the Rams out there. But, we were kids. I mean, we didn't have TV to watch, these games on. They weren't really on TV. You had We absolutely watched the Green Bay Packers. To this day, I'm a diehard Packer fan. And so I heard Joe talking about Lambeau Field. And it's the one place I haven't been to and I want to take my kids to. And but we were always out playing. We didn't sit and watch sports on TV. And a lot of sports weren't on TV. And yeah, we had heard the names. And when we collected baseball cards, they were on our spokes on the bikes. And after we got through trading them and so forth. But yeah, I knew Bob because he was from Milwaukee and my mom was with me at the Superstars. So she knew the Milwaukee connection. I knew the beer connection because he was doing the beer connect, less filling but I thought Don was Don Meredith because that was the only Don that I knew that was on TV.
That's so cute. Well, you have to tell Mike the story about your pickup games at UCLA.
Well, they, even when David was there, it was hard for a lot of the guys because they didn't want to hurt Dave Meyers' little sister. But certainly I played a lot of guys. I had a lot of racquetball time with Wilt Chamberlain. He was an unbelievable athlete and very competitive. And so he would come to the UCLA campus and we just kind of connected because he also had Wilt's Wonder Women. He had a track team. And so I ran track at UCLA and was a high jumper and pentathlete. And so he had seen me compete and so forth and came to our basketball games. And so I played a lot of racquetball with Wilt. But go to Pauley and I'd play with Marcus Johnson, Mark Eaton, a lot of the different guys that played for UCLA or the pros that would come in. And played with Magic Johnson and Michael Cooper and so forth. But it was just a great time to be at UCLA and to be able to play at Pauley in those pickup games. And it really helped prepare me, who thought for the next level that I'd have that tryout with the Pacers.
You touched on something as we've been talking about the various sports that you play. And today we don't see that as much in the youth because their parents get them in one sport and that's all they play and that's all they know. For you, is that something you would condone at this point? Because I think kids really miss out on a lot of things if they don't try other sports, especially when they're younger.
Yeah, we raised 3 children, and 2 boys and a girl, and I was always about play as many sports as you can. I was not about, being selective. I think parents get caught up today, unfortunately, that their child is going to be a professional athlete. They're going to get a scholarship. And so coaches are the same way. We didn't have the AAU like it is today. That's money. That's a big money-making machine, AAU. You get coaches that have 3 or 4 teams. I have no idea what it costs to be on a team. And then you're traveling. And so they're making a lot of money. Parents are putting a lot of money into it. And I know Time Magazine did an article quite a few years ago, and they were talking about the money that is spent on a child through their athletic time from when they're 5 to 18. They spend more on that than they would on a college education of 4 years. And so we know that's less than 2% that make it as a professional athlete. And there's more and more opportunities, which is great because of the internet and because of podcasts and because of radio shows and TV things and so forth. I see a lot of young kids, both men and women, branching out into sports, whether it's marketing and communications and, tickets. And there's just so many different avenues, becoming a trainer or strength and conditioning manager and so forth, broadcaster. So you don't have to continue to stay an athlete. They have things for becoming a general manager. How do you do that? We're seeing more women in baseball. Especially in the minor league, as far as the front office is concerned. Kim Ng down in with Florida Marlins and so forth. But there's opportunities today that probably weren't there when I was growing up, and which I love. And especially you're seeing more people of color in the diversity that you're seeing in sports behind the scenes, which I think is really important.
Well, there's no question about that. But you were a trailblazer. I mean, just looking at your career and everything that you did, and I know you've got things you're working on even now, even with your announcing with basketball. That you sent us something that you wanted to talk about on this podcast, and I don't have it in front of me.
What's wrong with you?
Leave it to Joe.
I sent it a day ahead of time.
Leave it to Joe. And why don't you talk about, is it women's 10 or women's X?
It's Title IX.
Okay.
It's Title IX, but Women X is just one of the, again, many fingers of where women are getting involved and creating so many different opportunities where I can't think of the names of. There's a young woman, there's a commercial, as a matter of fact, on the NBA channel especially, but even on ESPN, ABC, that she created her own business making tennis shoes, making competitive shoes, and which is not an easy business to get into when you're competing against the Nikes and Adidas and New Balance and Under Armour and so forth. And but women are creating for women athletes, and these are women that were athletes. And I think that that's so important to have that opportunity. And Women X is just another avenue to give information on women in sports and to teach history and let other women know what's going on and just the conversing back and forth. And the more communication you have about really volatile issues, I think you can come to a better understanding of a lot of different sides of how people see things.
Well, don't you think that's very special? Because you mentioned the history, and I noticed that when I was working and getting back closer to my record, that I was looking back on things that, I normally wouldn't have paid any attention to. But like you said, you follow the history of where you've been and where you're going. I think that's so important in today that we don't look at our past history and in what you've done and what you've accomplished. I mean, like our friend Kay Yao, you said you played on the Olympic team, and Kay was the first. She was the first coach to beat the Russians in the Olympics, and she was so proud of that, and we were so proud of her for it. And but sticking together and pulling together and trying to do everything the right way, it's so important. And I think sometimes women get frustrated because they have been left behind, and I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think they should ever give up when they have their heart and mind set on something.
No, and again, because of the opportunities to be able to get a scholarship and to continue to compete in a sport, it is all a plus. We know for a fact that about 80% of leadership positions that are held by women in corporate America, they were athletes. And we know what athletics teach everybody. And it doesn't matter what your gender, what your age, what your religion, what your nationality is. If you love a sport, why shouldn't you be able to continue to keep playing it? And I've always said it's a white man's world. It has been for a long time, and it still is, and it probably will be, just because even some of the laws that are going through in Congress. But in saying that, sports teaches you about winning and losing, adversity, teamwork, leadership, how to get along, loyalty, intensity, perseverance. There's just so many things that's life. That is life, whether it's in a relationship within your family or in your work, aspects and so forth, your friendships, your children. But sports is a wonderful thing because it teaches you so much. And, there's a saying that says success is not final. Courage, success is not, winning is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's courage that counts.
Yeah.
And that's true in everything in life, because we know we lose in sports all the time. We make mistakes all the time, and you have to learn to get through them. And, I've just been so fortunate to coming from a large family, learning how to work together as a family isn't always easy. And even now as adults, we have our disagreements and so forth, but it's wonderful to have that companionship. And you talk to enough athletes and they say, well, what do you miss about retiring? What do you miss? They miss the locker room. They miss the camaraderie. And that's what sports has given to women too. Yeah. They've given them the opportunity to be sisters and to be able to share in something that, they all are special, and maybe some are better in doing a skill than others. But to be able to have that camaraderie the rest of their life and that sisterhood, that's important for a lot of people down the road.
Oh, absolutely. And, being a Packer fan, you can remember that they attributed this statement to Vince Lombardi where he said, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. But Vince,
we have that up in our wall.
But Vince didn't say that.
No, he didn't.
Vince said, winning isn't everything, but the will to win is. And that's what's important. And
then Coach Wooden, there's so many quotes from Papa that, he never talked about winning. He never talked about winning. He talked about being your best. Be the best that you can be. And don't try and be better than somebody else. And that's your success. But that's very hard in this day and age, as far as because we put so much emphasis on winning and losing, especially for coaches and when change has to happen. And, I want to tell one story because when Joe Buck was talking about Pedro Martinez, that last year at the World Series when the Dodgers were competing and Bob Costas and Pedro were doing the broadcast at the end, the post-game stuff. And I can't remember who else was on it. But my daughter and I waited afterwards in center field, saw Bob Costas, and we saw Pedro. My daughter had never heard this story. And I don't know if you have, Joe, but Pedro came up and I asked him, please tell the story to Drew about her dad and you. And so when he was in Montreal, because he'd been with the Dodgers and they traded him to the Montreal Expos. And so the Dodgers were in Montreal and they were playing, and Pedro was with them at that time. And Don, I don't know, was it at the hotel or was it at the clubhouse or at the ballpark or what? But he went up to Pedro and it was kind of one-on-one. Nobody knew about it. And Don said, you're tipping your pitches. He said, what? He said, when you do a fastball, you do this with your glove. When you do a changeup, whatever. And he said, you can see it. And Pedro says, your dad, to my daughter, your dad changed my career.
Wow.
Yeah,
and he started choking up.
Yeah.
And for him to tell that story.
Well, your husband, Ann, was one of the greats. I had a chance to know him a little bit. Bob Gibson and I used to do a radio show in St. Louis. And Don would come sit in, and the stories would go back and forth because the Cardinals and Dodgers were so competitive at that time. And if you didn't see Gibson and Koufax, you saw Gibson and Drysdale. And, in that era, as you well know, guys didn't have a problem making sure guys weren't too comfortable in the batter's box. So that may be a couple of guys that would get hit along the way. And your husband and Bob Gibson were big enough. If somebody wanted to come out to the mound and visit with them about it, that's okay by them.
That's right. And Gibby played for the Globetrotters.
That's right. Meadowlark Lemon was his roommate.
Yeah. I played with Meadowlark in a game and practiced with him in LA. He was unbelievable how he could shoot the ball off both feet and his balance and everything. He was an incredible basketball player.
Speaking of basketball players, you're involved in the WNBA and you see Taurasi every night. The best player you've ever seen?
That I'm not a GOAT person. I'm not the best there ever was. Like you just said, Gibby and Donnie, Sandy, Juan Marichal, so many great pitchers, so many great hitters. Who's the best? Is it Jim Brown or Walter Payton or, go down the list as far as running backs. And, Diana is a great player. She's one of the best to play this game. I know we've had a lot because of the WNBA, and it's our 27th year, 26th year. And the fact that we have the opportunity to talk about so many wonderful athletes that have played in the WNBA, whether it's Elisa Leslie or Cynthia Cooper or Maya Moore, Brianna Stewart now, and Elena Deladon and Candace Parker. So we've got such great players, and Diana's special. Diana is special. And, we've been fortunate to win 3 WNBA titles because of her and Penny Taylor and Cappie Pondexter and Tangela Smith. But we've got great players, Sue Bird and Lauren Jackson, who's playing now, Sue Bird still. And, the list just goes on. And I love the fact that we have a league that you can continue to talk about these wonderful women athletes that have played the game.
So how about her being just tied for first? That's a safe.
I saw too many players in my generation too. You're talking. I don't. Again, it's the great players of yesteryear. It's like you're going to say Bill Russell or Oscar Robertson or Jerry West or Wilt couldn't play today. I mean, it's like, but you've got players like a Teresa Edwards or Carol Blazejowski who averaged 38 points in college at Montclair State without the 3-point line and with the regular size ball. So that's like Pete Maravich numbers. And, so yeah, she's so special. I mean, just her determination out there. We just had the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame this past weekend. Penny Taylor, her wife, went in, who was an incredible player herself, played on 2 Olympic teams in Australia. And again, playing here in Phoenix, she was fabulous. But, Diana there's something special. She reminded me the most of a Cheryl Miller. Cheryl Miller, had that intensity inside her, and she went after everything. And Diana is the same way. You just know that every time the shot goes up, it's going in. May not, but the next one's going to. And she just has this will to win, which it's been incredible to watch her play.
Well, so, you're way too modest because you're the best female athlete that I've ever seen. And
well, if you ever saw my brother David play, I was just a smaller version.
He's a good player. He was on some good Milwaukee teams too.
Yes, he was. Yeah, I'd see Bob Lanier, who we just lost.
Just lost him, yeah.
And Dauber would come up to me and say, "Your brother cost me an NBA championship." And Marcus would tell you too that when David retired, Bob had come to the Bucks, and Marcus was on the team, and Junior Bridgman, and because David did all the little things. David would set screens, he'd get the rebounds, he'd just make the passes, and he was that kind of leader. And it was unfortunate that he retired. He had some injuries and so forth, and but he got to see his kids grow up, and we lost him. Was it about 6 or 7 years now that he had cancer? And but he was just so much fun to watch play.
Well, Ann Meyers, this has been an honor for me, and I'm sure a treat for our listeners and viewers. And you being a great friend to Joe West, it all comes together. And this has just been a terrific opportunity to visit with you and share some of your stories. You were one of my idols, and to have a chance to listen and talk to you has been a real treat. So we thank you for being part of what we do.
Thank you very much, and I can't wait to hear more podcasts.
Oh, you're so sweet. We love you.
Love you too, Joe. Say hi to Rita.
Okay.
For Ann Meyers and Joe West, I'm Mike Claiborne. We thank you for listening to another edition of 5460, the Joe West Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
My baby took me to the ballpark to see a baseball game. Lord, it had to be at least 99 in the shade. I was stealing a glance at some tight short pants just as I turned my head. My baby grabbed me by the arm and this is what she said. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.
You've been listening to 5460, the Joe West Podcast, here on the Podcast Heat Network. Make sure to subscribe and don't miss an episode each and every Monday. We'll talk to you next week.
She's checking all the signs while I'm enjoying 2 of the great American pastimes. It's fouling up my nerve watching all these curves, remembering what she said to me. And if I get caught looking, it's gonna be strike 3. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.